Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. And it's recording, so we can share this with anyone who is late or wants a copy of it after the presentation. Welcome to our webinar on the right to repair. Today we have Gay Gordon Byrne, who is with the Repair Association. But first we have Dave Smith, Vice President of the United Appliance Servicers Association, who would like to say a couple words. Dave?
Yes, thanks, Sarah. Thanks, everyone. Welcome to part 2 of our educational series on the right to repair legislation. This is going to be an ongoing series. I believe we have another one scheduled for another week or two. So there's good things coming as far as educating ourselves on this very important topic. Education is the core of our mission at UASA, and we invite each of you to listen and learn and determine how this might impact your own businesses and our entire industry. This is a very important issue for all of us, and every business owner must make their own decisions about this topic. So our association is dedicated to improving our industry and supporting all of our membership. So as Sarah said, we have invited our guest for today, Gay Gordon Byrne from the Repair Association, who is very at the forefront of working with legislation on right to repair in, I believe, over 22 states right now. So welcome, Gay, and thank you.
We can't hear you, Gay.
Can't hear you, Gay.
Gay, we can't hear you. Okay, she'll be right back.
Okay, perfect. Sorry about that, folks.
We'll go back to the beginning.
Maybe you can hear me better now?
Yes.
Oh, good.
There you go.
I don't know what happened. If I'm talking, let me just do this without the video right now, and maybe that'll help keep it together. I'm the executive director of the Repair Association. We're an umbrella group of people that are involved in repair, and actually a little bit beyond that. Some of our members are simply hobbyists, enthusiasts. Some are digital rights groups such as the Electronic Frontier Foundation. Some are consumer driven like Consumer Reports, and some of them are resellers, some of them are authorized, some of them aren't authorized. So we're used to the impact on the whole variety of repair as a spectrum from cradle to grave. Frankly, we're at this point today because repair monopolies have become easy. 20 years ago it wasn't easy. Today it's easy. And the reason is the internet. It's possible for manufacturers. I think they started legitimately just changing their cost structure by, instead of printing documentation and schematics and mailing them out, they posted them on the internet and people could just download them. It would be easier. And it was definitely cheaper. And then some bright light decided, oh, gee, let's make people log in so we know who's on. And then, gee, while they're logged in, why don't we just charge them? So it became very easy for manufacturers to cut their costs and monopolize repair. And it's very much to their advantage because obviously if you can sell more products, if they can't be repaired or get a lot of money for charging for repair, it's to the advantage of the OEM. So it's easy. We've gotten to the point now across nearly every industry that no matter what product you're talking about, 90% of the manufacturers are monopolizing repair. It's a pretty devastating situation for consumers. I'm sure if you've seen some of the hearings in Congress, they're very attentive to the fact that these are not good practices. We don't want to have Google and Amazon and Apple and Microsoft being the only source of anything. And part of the reason they've become that easy to monopolize is the contracts themselves no longer reflect what it used to mean when you bought something. So the contracts are a mess. The monopolies are very easy, and we're at this juncture not related to appliances per se, but for everything. So the business model conflict is already set up. Manufacturers want to sell more. It's easier for them to sell more if the first event of repair turns into, the first failure turns into a shopping trip. And the user has a very different point of view. The user, like me, you, and everybody else in here, don't particularly like paying to buy things that used to work and should be fixed. It's obviously not a very partisan situation. Everybody needs to fix their stuff or throw it away and buy new. The unifying principle behind all of this, which is where all of the questions come home to roost, is who owns the equipment. Because under our system of ownership, which has not changed, if it's your owner controls, and there's no middle ground between owning things and partially owning things. You either own it or you don't, which is where the whole licensing situation has gone awry, because in the beginning of the computer industry, the licenses were, as they should be, separate. If you licensed an operating system like you license Windows, you paid Microsoft for the license, but you still owned the personal computer. And in a lot of industries, that license has become merged in documentation. It doesn't mean it's not still property, but it's become very muddled. And it's very hard for a consumer to understand what they bought and what they licensed. And in the licensing world, copyright law controls. All these licenses that are claimed are fully protected. There's no risk of losing control of IP, either patents or copyrights in legislation, for one really, really simple reason, is that states can't do that. The only parties that can change copyright law and patent law is Congress. And some of that has been done, some of it hasn't been done, but everything that is in the right to repair bills that we're promoting is still within the context of whatever the feds say, the feds say.
Hey, Gay.
Yeah.
Sorry to hop in. Some people are saying they can't hear you.
Oh.
I can hear you perfect. I can hear you coming through. But some are saying they can't. So,
yeah, I'm seeing the on-air button, and you're hearing me. And
yeah, the signal's good.
Yeah.
Okay. So they're reconnecting. So it's working. Okay. Sorry to interrupt. It looks like we have a solution. So I'm sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I'm happy to go back if anybody has questions that maybe they missed because I started before they could hear me.
Okay, and it's recording, so we can share it as well.
Okay, good.
Okay,
I'm just afraid if I turn on my video that
Yep.
I'll lose the voices. So
We're
sorry.
Good. Thank you.
Okay.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Your turn.
All right, so anybody that didn't hear me, basically, you bought it, you own it, you're supposed to be able to fix it. That's kind of that's the bottom line on all these laws. Now, right to repair really has been implemented. It has been passed. It was passed first in Massachusetts in 2013, and it went to the ballot in 2013, and it was approved by 86%. There was some negotiating that had to happen because there was two versions. But the problem with the right to repair for automobiles is that it's just for automobiles. It was exactly the right language that was needed for everything else, but they did it. Basically, it was driven by the independent auto mechanics. And so it wound up being the basis for a national agreement between trade associations rather than national statute. It's worked for the most part. You're able to fix your car in New York State, where I live, because the bill allows mechanics to buy parts and tools and diagnostics from the manufacturer. But I guess the reason I'm bringing it up is that the bill really functions, and the only difference is what the product set applies to. So had the bill said appliances back in 2013, this conversation wouldn't be happening. But it didn't. It said autos. So the net effect of that is that manufacturers thought, and maybe legitimately or not, thought that they were going to lose their valuable IP. That didn't happen. They claimed that consumers were going to be driving off the road because incompetent repair was going to be incomplete and they were going to be terribly harmed, and that didn't happen. And in the meantime, what's happened is that the auto industry has remained very healthy. The aftermarket auto repair industry supports roughly 500,000 jobs, which is a lot of jobs. And these jobs are in every single town I can imagine of over 10,000 people, maybe smaller. So they're very widely distributed. Your car can break down in the middle of nowhere, and I live in the middle of nowhere in upstate New York, and I can get it fixed locally. The other impact on that is that the average life of an automobile is 20 years. And outside of the warranty period, which may be somewhere between 3 and 5 years, nearly all of those older cars are supported entirely by independent repair, local mechanics, not dealerships. And that is what's helped all of us in the entire country to be able to keep our cars running. Now, I heard an interesting statistic from a lobbyist from AHAM in Vermont in testimony, and she said refrigerators used to last 20 years. And the question came back saying, well, how long do they last now? And she said 12 years. And then the follow-up question was, why is that happening? And she just, without any hesitation, said electronics. So we have a big problem. You put electronics in stuff that didn't used to have it, it's not going to last as long. You've got to be able to fix it, or it's doomed. So the bills themselves, they're all pretty much the same. We have a template bill that's up on our website. Every state legislating drafting office always likes to make their own little tiny tweaks, but by and large, the requirements are identical to the requirements for automotive right to repair, with a couple of small exceptions. The bills that we have promoted require manufacturers to sell parts and tools on fair and reasonable terms. And there's a litany of what fair and reasonable means. We've not had a lot of pushback that says that language is not correct. It requires manufacturers to share their service documentation and schematic diagrams, mostly for free, because most of them are up on the internet. But if they were required to be produced physically, there's an out for that, so that manufacturers don't have to, they can get reimbursed for printing and shipping. Firmware patches and fixes should always be free because they're always on the internet. And that's not nearly what most people think it is. I'll go into that in a little bit more. And then, of course, everybody needs the same diagnostic tools, whether it's an oscilloscope or whether or not it's an embedded piece of software within the device that says, I can't connect to this part. This part is not working. And it's those things that are required. There's nothing that says that any manufacturer has to produce documentation they don't already produce. They don't have to go create user-friendly documentation. The requirement is it be the same, that they're already producing in the same format that they're already producing, and it should be available in the same time frame. So if you're an authorized provider, your independent provider down the road is going to have the same access as you have, but not additional. So most consumers would probably not find this to be any kind of do-it-yourself guide. They may, who knows what the YouTubers will do, but the requirement is not beyond what is already out there. Now, of course, we get a lot of pushback on this, and I wanted to share with you the legal framework under which this bill is moving, the bills are moving. The first criteria is that it is not legal for manufacturers to demand of a consumer that they buy another product or service as a condition of use. That's called an illegal tying agreement under the Sherman Act, which is antitrust law. The fact that the DOJ and the FTC have been asleep at the switch for 20 years hasn't helped, but it doesn't mean that these actions aren't still illegal, and they are. And if you've been following the activities of Congress, you see that there's quite a lot of renewed interest in antitrust. I don't think anybody's going to be breaking these companies up, but I do think they're going to require some changes to their behavior that will effectively remove their cradle-to-grave control, at least the illegal parts of it. It is legal under patent law for you to repair your stuff. Patents are already public. They are filed publicly in exchange for a literal monopoly on production. So if you're not making parts and you're not making products, you're not violating anybody's patent. Now, China doesn't feel the same way, but I can't do anything about that. They're stealing stuff upside down and backwards. It's a terrible problem, but it's not a problem of repair. Similarly, copyright law, it's also specifically legal under copyright law to repair your stuff. And it's legal in a couple of ways. First, within the DMCA, which is the copyright law signed in 1998, you can back up and restore all of your licensed software. In other words, making that copy is not an infringement, because copyright means copy. So you're allowed to make a copy for purposes of repair. That works really, really well. And then even in the situation where manufacturers have added locks, digital rights management type of locks, the Copyright Office studied this problem and agreed with us 2, maybe 3 years ago that consumers still needed to have the right to repair their stuff. And in the broad exemption for using locks, for breaking locks, was included all IoT devices, all home appliances, all land-based motor vehicles, pretty much all computers, cell phones, everything pretty much other than gaming stations. Because there is a problem, we know there's a problem with people stealing content, but everything that's not content related is legal to break the locks. The Magnuson-Moss Warranty Act is something that manufacturers in this space, in the home appliance space, have been dreadful, absolutely dreadful. They're in almost universal violation of that statute that says you can't tell the customer that they're going to lose their warranty coverage if they use independent repair or use non-OEM original parts. That study, US PIRG did that study, and I don't know that anybody's really changed their policies, but it seems to have been, it definitely got the attention of the Federal Trade Commission, and they've just been funded to put out the report that they should have done from last year. So we're going to see some action from the FTC on warranties. And then the last thing that people are always commonly concerned about is trade secrets. And the reality is there's also federal law that governs what is a trade secret. It's the Uniform Trade Secrets Act. And when you look at the Trade Secrets Act, it says if you're publishing anything, such as a user manual, or not a user, such as a repair manual to anybody, it's not a secret anymore. So if manufacturers are putting trade secrets in their repair documentation, they really shouldn't be, and they won't be able to claim it as a trade secret if it's been distributed. That's kind of the legal framework. Most everything falls within that framework of not violating trade secrets, which are disclaimed because we want to make it clear that we don't want any trade secrets. Frankly, if you're in the beverage dispenser repair business, you know that you don't need the secret formula for Coke, which is a real trade secret, in order to fix the beverage dispenser. And these are things that slow legislation down, but they don't stop it. Now, the one thing that gets kind of technical, and this is the world that I lived in. I started my IT career as a systems programmer, of all things, working with products that attached to the firmware. And when people talk about embedded software, they're really talking firmware. It's just two different ways to describe it. And rather than get all hung up on what it is technically, I just want you to think about pizza. And what the ingredients of pizza are: there's pizza dough, and there's some kind of toppings. It's cheese and sauce and maybe pepperoni and things on top. Firmware is more like the yeast in the dough. It's inseparable from the dough. So if you think of the pizza dough as being the hardware and everything else that goes on top of it as being some kind of licensed application, you can't buy pizza dough without yeast. Well, good luck. You probably wouldn't be making your own stuff, but that's what it is. You can't pull the embedded software away from the flour in the dough and still have a pizza. And that's what most of this really comes down to. So everything that's like a slice of pepperoni that's an application that has value, it's not touched by right to repair. And I have a feeling most of the products that you're dealing with don't have any real application value anyway. They turn on, they turn off. And that's, if they're connected to the internet so you can see that your eggs are still in your refrigerator, that would be an application. It should be controlled as an application and not as a piece of hardware. At least that was my opinion. These are the arguments we get in opposition, no matter who we're talking to, whether it's AHAM or AEM or EDA or AdvaMed or who else, I don't know. The usual, I call them the usual suspects because they're so consistent. Safety and liability, again, back to the premise of ownership. The owner is responsible for their own safety. They are responsible for their own liability. Every contract between a manufacturer and the user always says this. There's all these disclaimers and limitations of liability. And if you read those contracts, and believe me, I've read thousands of them, everybody disclaims anything you could possibly do to yourself as being not their fault. And they seem to like to say, oh, we're the only people qualified to make these repairs, otherwise you're going to get hurt and we're going to get sued. Their liability for litigation doesn't change. The biggest problem with products and safety is that they're unsafe. They're unsafe by design. They're unsafe because they were manufactured incorrectly, and that's why there's product recalls. There's lots. There was an article out today about cars where the National Highway Safety Commission, and I might not have that right, but the feds are saying, hey, we've built this application where if you want to, we can notify you of every recall that has been issued for your vehicle. I'm like, that's fantastic. So if you're a manufacturer listening in on this and you think you're going to be exposed to additional liability, the answer is no. If your product is unsafe to use or it's unsafe to repair, that's not a good thing. That's a very bad thing. And you want to make sure that those problems are fixed so that you don't wind up in a recall situation. I think I talked about the proprietary rights. Proprietary is not an actual right. It is a word that references a suite of rights, otherwise known as copyrights, patents, and trade secrets. So if somebody says they're worried about their proprietary rights, they aren't being specific. And they should be specific because under patent, copyright, and trade secret law, right to repair doesn't touch those things. And it can't. They're federal. Brand image, usually when things are getting really, really, when they're running out of things to say, they'll bring up brand image and they'll say, well, my brand image is going to be hurt. And I need to remind everybody that brand image is not illegal. It's not legal. It's a marketing concept. But the consumer has paid for that brand image when they buy the equipment. They've paid for everything that went into the R&D, the intellectual property, the brand image, the quality of the advertising. All of that is paid for in what's known as the first sale. And nobody is going to get anywhere claiming that their brand image is going to be harmed because the Supreme Court is pretty darn solid on first sale. And you buy it, it's yours. Whatever prompted you to buy it in the first place is part of what the manufacturer gets paid for. And that's it. There's no extra dip at the consumer wallet just because you want to protect your brand image. And the boogeyman of all of this, and it really is a boogeyman, is cybersecurity. We keep going down this road at every legislative session because somebody hasn't figured out that cybersecurity, or they've been persuaded that their pension funds are somehow going to be sucked up in the process of repair. Or they've heard some advertisement about how their personal identity is going to be stolen. And these are problems, but they're not problems of repair. We've been down this road a number of times. We've got a whole suite of cybersecurity experts that work on this topic with us. When we were in front of the FTC, we had the guy that wrote the entire credit card banking encryption sitting with us, and he argued pretty hard with one of the opposition, and they both wound up agreeing that, there really isn't an intersection at all between cybersecurity and repair. The product is either built to be secure or it's not. And unfortunately, in a lot of cases, particularly in the appliance world, the questions, security is highly questionable, may not exist at all. If it exists, it may only exist of a password that is factory set, like admin. And those are the things that cause denial of service attacks. Those are the things that allow hackers to penetrate into millions of devices. And that's not a function of repair. That thing was built like that. And the only way that it gets fixed is if they add a fix to it, which is why you've got to be able to update the patches and fixes in order to keep your device secure. But again, that's not a function of repair. That's the manufacturer and how they approach cybersecurity. So I can leave you with that and go on to what's happening legislatively. I love this slide because it's not our slide. This came from the American Equipment Dealers Association, call it Big Ag, and they've got it so wrong. Although I love that they've identified for us where they're going to be spending money, because they've already missed 7 states. And I'm laughing because the 7 states that they've missed could easily pass this bill and they would never know about it. Well, they will. But the important part is I think you see that there's activity all over the nation, from Hawaii to Maine, north to south, east to west, cold to hot. And of this, we are at the point where we should have passed legislation this year. There was 3 states where bills were set up for voting on the floor. And the way it works with legislation is that very, very few bills are brought up for a vote if it's known the bill's going to fail. It's too embarrassing. They don't do it. So if we know that we're going to the floor, we know we've won. And we were there, except for COVID. So we expect we'll be back in full force in 2021. We've been in discussions with enough legislators that I think I can confidently say there'll be 25 bills. There may be more. We've had bills in 34 states. Not all of them progressed. But so again, the 2020 session was a short session because it's an election year. So 2021, we should see full bore work again, and very, very well supported, nonpartisan. Now, for those of you that are not upset that the OEMs are going to have to face competition for repair services, you might want to get involved personally in your state and make sure that you call your legislators. We set up a tool on our website, repair.org/standup, that'll give you access to pre-formatted phone numbers, pre-formatted letter format. As an organization, as a business, I encourage you to write a letter of support to your state senator and your state representative. You can look them up or we can help you. If you do that, I'd appreciate it if you'd send me a copy of the letter so we can put it in any packets that we're going to send out to any lobbyists or groups that are working with bill sponsors. We'd also welcome anybody that's interested in joining the Repair Association. Our primary focus on membership in your community is to be able to hire lobbyists in states where we think we can move legislation. You don't have to be visible. You can be anonymous. Your membership dues are tax deductible business expenses. We're not a charity. We do operate as a trade association, but that aspect of our work is focused pretty tightly on the cell phone repair business because they don't have groups like yours. So that's where I'm at.
Okay,
Dave, I have
thank
a
you.
couple questions.
Sure.
Yep, go ahead.
Go ahead, Dave.
Okay, yeah, I was just going to say, we're as an association, we're in the position where we all want the same thing, and we want the same thing the manufacturers want. We all want to repair appliances safely, efficiently. As an association, we want all our members to have the technical information and the tools that they're needed. I think sometimes where we have a little bit of some differences is where that common ground is between all the players here. And so how do we accomplish this? Is you're saying that you're in 22 different states, 25 different bills, 34 different issues going on, and so what are all these bills like? I mean, is there consistency in these? Is there how do you know what these are? Okay, just don't get me wrong, these are a bunch of politicians putting these together. So how do we know what is going to be in the end result of these things at the end? Are we going to have 25 different things to have to deal with?
I think it's going to be a lot like the auto industry, where one state actually gets it done, and then it's adopted nationally, even if it's informal. Manufacturers are going to have to figure out how to cope with the situation that, let's say Indiana passes a bill. Everybody near Indiana can sure as hell go to Indiana to buy parts and tools. And then anything that's on the internet there instantly. It's extremely hard for manufacturers to cope with the idea of I think they call it a crazy quilt. So we expect that we'll be doing a lot of negotiating once the first bills pass. The bills that we promote are identical. What happens with legislators is that they have their own pet peeves. We know what their pet peeves are, and if they ask us for any assistance, adding requirements or exempting various industries, we try to help them draft that language so that there is consistency. I'll give you an example. In Washington State, one of the bill sponsors, now Washington State, as you know, is the home of Microsoft. Microsoft was making a suite of products called, oh God, what the hell were they? This is terrible not to know. Anyway, they were laptops, and they were being widely flogged in Washington for educational purposes, but they weren't repairable. They were glued totally together. And this infuriated the legislator, and so he put in basically the no glue edition. And Microsoft didn't like that, and they made sure to kill the bill. But the no glue thing is a real problem. We don't include that because it gets into design criteria that we don't want to have anything to do with. But that's an example of what changes. There are a couple states that love right to repair, but are terrified that the medical industry will see this as an excuse for you to do your DIY home pacemaker. And rather than fight the medical lobby, which is being fought right now federally, they'll exempt that category of equipment. But for you guys' purposes, we've not had a single legislator ask to exempt home appliances. And none have asked to exempt cell phones and personal computers either. So the appetite is definitely out there to make sure consumers can get their stuff fixed under their control. And I think you're probably in a pretty good spot, because I don't think a lot of people do their own appliance repairs. Well, maybe they do, but it's never been a large segment of the market the way it is for personal computers.
Okay, where can somebody go, one of our members or anyone interested in this, to read these bills, especially the ones for their state?
We have the portal where it says advocacy. There's a copy of the sample bill, and then on the stand-up page, there's every state we have a link, and in that link there's the bill number.
And that's on repair.org.
It's on
your
repair.org. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And it may take a little bit of, you probably have to do the extra step to go Google the bill number and the state, but you'll find it instantly. It's very easy.
Okay. I have a couple questions that I've been sent, if you don't mind.
I don't mind.
Okay. Knowing that the public may possibly have access to the same information and part sources as the independent professional servicers provide, what value will this add to the servicer?
You will have a small amount of preference for people to do it themselves. They're probably doing it themselves now. Your value is that you know what you're doing. You can show that you know what you're doing. You're local, and you have things in stock.
Okay. Another one. What changes can we expect from manufacturers for the independent servicer if this Right to Repair Act passes?
Every independent will have access to every brand. So instead of being just tied to having a service, access to the service materials for, I know GE has been sold, but use GE as an example. You'll have everything. So you can then go out and build your business as I'm the repair expert on every refrigerator, not just a GE brand. Okay. I think it's probably the only way that, and I can tell you this from the independent computer repair industry, our industry is not going to survive without being able to expand the number of brands that we can support.
Okay. Another question is, does the fact that OEMs no longer have to supply replacement parts for a longer period of time, does that relate to making a case for right to repair? So like without certain parts, it's hard to repair it. So then
yeah.
That would leave.
Our parts requirement is that they sell them on fair and reasonable terms if they have them. But there are 3 states already, and California is one probably the largest of them, that already require that manufacturers provide spare parts for I think it's 7 years after date of manufacture. So parts should be more available than they are today. France is definitely going to be pushing the envelope of that. If you haven't already watched what's going on in Europe, appliances are very much in focus for the EU and in France in particular, where all manufacturers will be required, if they're going to do business in France, to disclose how many years their product's supposed to last. And there's also some requirements of parts availability in Europe. So I know that some of the manufacturers are looking at that pretty carefully because they are multinational. And yeah, parts, that's why we require parts, and we require them on fair and reasonable terms, because it doesn't do you any good to know how to fix something if you can't get a part.
Okay. Dave, do you have anything else?
Yeah, I just want to expand on, I want to expand on just one thing that you kind of brought up just briefly about the do-it-yourselfers. Some members have, like I said, we all want the same technical information as servicers, but we're all concerned with the do-it-yourselfers, and we already have a lot of them, like you say, Gabe, that are doing that now. But there is a fear that there's going to be a lot more of them out there, and they're going to be getting a lot deeper and for lack of better terms, screw things up worse than what they already have. And then we kind of get involved in this. So all these right to repair legislation, this opens the door to the public. Anybody can get it, no matter who they are. This is completely free. The manufacturers have to provide this at their cost to everybody. Is that basically how this is going to work?
No, there's no relationship to their cost. Their cost, the standard is fair and reasonable terms. And if you want to know how that's worked, look at auto right to repair. If you've bought any parts from an auto dealer, you will know that it's not all what they say is fair is not always what I think is fair. But yeah, it's not. I mean, I've fixed a number of things myself, but I think the do-it-yourselfers are not the problem. You guys have the skills, the expertise, and you will do very well if you're doing a good job. I mean, even when we had in otherwise a very open repair market for mainframe repair, the best anybody ever did was capture 15% of the market as an independent or a do-it-yourselfer. And people did do their own, believe it or not. There's plenty of people that are capable of pulling out a server card and stuffing a new one in.
Okay, so
I'm
on that note,
I apologize. Okay.
No,
yes.
You're good. I was just going to say on that note, we have a question. You've given examples on computers, but do you have any major appliance examples on your radar right now?
Yeah, it's an interesting situation. There's a lot of parts that are being tied to the main system. You may not see them that way. We see them a lot now, where you could take a replacement part that's brand new from the OEM, stick it into the used machine, and the machine will demand a password or a cryptographic tying relationship. And that means that you got to go back to the manufacturer for permission to use the spare part. And what I think is going to happen is that's going to proliferate like crazy unless we can stomp on it soon. And that has the potential to really kill your businesses as well. Because if the only way that you can get the part to work is to go back to the manufacturer, then you have to have the manufacturer's blessing and engagement on every transaction. It's not like you can have a bunch of parts sitting in the back of the car or the van and go out and do your work and say, hey, everything's great, and then hand the consumer an invoice and walk out with payment. You're going to have to engage with the manufacturer, hopefully over the internet, in some secure way in order for them to bless the work that you just did. I see this as really slowing down the repair process. I see it as being absolutely infuriating to customers. And the guys in the middle are you guys. So I think it's a lot better to be able to put a part in, validate using the diagnostics that it works correctly, and then bill your customer and go on your way. This is not going to get any easier.
Does anyone else have questions you'd like to submit before we let Gate go back to work?
Oh no, this is work. I do this all day, every day. And I'm sorry if I'm not answering your question exactly the way you want it. Please come back at me, please.
Yes. Well, no. Oh, here's one. I heard a while ago that smart parts were only going to be able to get unlocked by authorized servicers. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yes, that's exactly
Okay.
what I'm saying.
So with the Right to Repair Act, that would be kind of null and void. That
Correct.
wouldn't. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because again, when we go back to what you own and what you license, you already paid for everything to be working. The pizza dough is there. You should be able to put toppings on it.
So, okay, a follow-up question. What's stopping manufacturers from doing that now?
Nothing. They're doing it now.
Okay, and then another question. If we're paying for information now, so there's some that are non-authorized, in the service network that are paying for information, will it be free after the bill passes?
That's a
to
good
people
question.
that were previously paying?
We're trying to toe to the standard of whatever the manufacturer was doing before, just needs to be more broadly available. Some of the questions about whether they really do they really charge the authorized dealers $5,000 to access a suite of diagnostics, or is that list price and they charge that only to the independents? If it's list price and the net price is different, the net price applies. I don't know if that makes any sense, but the chances are good that the prices that you're paying are not the prices that your authorized provider is paying.
Okay, I got one question for you. So it kind of brings me up thinking about tech lines. So what you're talking about is the printed or online technical information, but what about tech lines? We're a lot of us are authorized servicers, and sometimes we have access to call-in lines for free. Sometimes some manufacturers will open that up to anybody, and in some situations you have to pay for that service. So what does the right to repair legislation, how does that affect that service?
There's nothing in the legislation that changes any of that, for good or bad.
Okay,
if you have a suggestion that that's something we ought to put in there, we'd certainly want to know what the problems are and how to better protect the independent repair provider.
Well, I'm taking, actually, that's just one of those things that's voiced to me and others, is that, we already have long wait times for, to call in technical lines. I think it would be unrealistic, in my opinion, for that to open up to the world to do. I don't see how the manufacturers could even begin to contend with that scenario. However, I just think that it's a very complicated. There's so many different versions of this that when you get into it state by state, it can change, and we don't know what it's going to look like at the end of the day.
Well, from the perspective of the legislation that has been moving, that has not been different in any bill. I know, for example, in the auto industry, there's similar kinds of arrangements, and those arrangements didn't change under automotive right to repair. So I don't see that there's a difference. We can't prevent legislators from doing something altogether off the wall, but generally, states can't. There's a lot of things states can't do, and that's probably one of them. The value right to repair is actually the active part of the legislation is unfair and deceptive contracts. So it's a requirement that if you're going to do business in the state of Michigan, as example, that you as a manufacturer cannot compel somebody to use manufacturer only repair because the contracts themselves are unfair. So there's things that states can't do within their, and I think one of them is they can't make design requirements. So that's why the guy in Washington was kind of an outlier, making a design requirement related to glue. I don't think that states have the authority to tell a manufacturer how to deliver service either. It's just that whatever they deliver to you as an authorized provider, they need to make available on equivalent terms to an unauthorized provider.
Okay, I have a question that was just sent. What is the governing body that regulates the auto industry that you referenced?
The governing body. I think it's NHSTA, National Highway Transportation Safety Administration.
Okay.
There's probably there's so many regulators in this country. It's kind of it's.
Okay.
Yeah, NHSTA is definitely the one that I referenced earlier.
Okay, and then you mentioned the Sherman Act.
Yep.
Can you expand on what exactly is the violation?
Well, under the Sherman Act, manufacturers, and this goes back to 1908 with the old original trust busters, is that the sale has to be a complete sale. You can't be required to buy something else in addition to the original sale in order to use the equipment or the product. So it's a way to keep tying of various different products out of the transaction. So, for example, if you were, let's see, railroad magnate, you could sell transportation services, but you couldn't also demand that that railroad buy your train tracks from you as a steel manufacturer. That it's the tying of the two transactions that's illegal. I don't know if that answered the question. I'm a little weak on my 1908 law analogies. Just bring me a pizza, I'll tell you.
Yeah. Okay, so somebody just commented about replacement water filters. So does that not, you have to buy certain replacement water filters when you buy a certain kind of refrigerator?
Yep, that would be covered. That you can't force a consumer to buy your brand of replacement water filter. But again, good luck getting good luck right now getting the DOJ or the FTC to lean on that ridiculous. I mean, the coffee cups. The Keurig was putting out DRM enabled coffee pods till they got humiliated. The government didn't step in. People just said, hell with that. And they wouldn't buy the coffee pods. But that's a very small ticket problem. I mean, if you spent $50 on a coffee maker and you got pissed off, you could probably go out and spend another $50 or $20 on a Mr. Coffee and get that problem to go away. But not when you've spent thousands and thousands of dollars on a major appliance.
Okay, I have a question. The an automotive industry has standard OBD ports and diagnostic tools. Is there anything in the current legislation for that? Because you'd have to have the whole industry come together for something like that, which I would think would be a big project. And is there any mandates on that or any suggestions about that?
Actually, that kind of backfired on the auto industry. They spent 1.5 years negotiating that one small point. And the way they wrote it, they just left a giant gaping loophole, and they failed to include the idea that the OBD2 port might not be the only way of delivering diagnostic information. So they failed to keep it flexible enough, and now the manufacturers are saying, well, we're going to start delivering the diagnostics wirelessly and only to the dealership. And they were victims of that requirement. We started out with a big umbrella, and those of us in the computer industry knew that wireless was already one of many different ways of delivering diagnostics. So we avoided any of those kind of very specific requirements for the very obvious reason that negotiating would be a bitch, and keeping tabs on that would probably be run around in a second, and it would eviscerate the point of the bill. So yeah, the short answer is yes, we know about it, and B, we don't do it, because if as soon as we start defining things specifically, the manufacturers will figure out how to run around it in a second.
Okay, I have a couple more, unless Dave, do you have another one, a follow-up?
I do not. That's
Okay.
all. That's the end of my question.
I have, how does this legislation affect liability for the repair company if owners are being provided information but not training? Following an untrained repair effort could create liability for the service provider, couldn't it?
Well, the way personal liability liability law works is that it's messy, and lawyers will sue anybody for anything, but it's not smart for the manufacturers to withhold the information that makes repairs safer, because like a sticker on a ladder that says don't stand on the top step, you could fall over and hurt yourself. That's like an invitation to a tort lawyer that they made no effort to provide the safe information. The other problem is the product itself has to be defective. You can fall off that ladder, but unless you can prove the ladder was defective, it doesn't matter it does matter who owns the equipment, because when you sign on a sale, you're saying that I'm now the owner, and I've allowed the manufacturer to disclaim all responsibility. And the only responsibility they can't disclaim is gross negligence. So unless you're building a defective ladder and building a product that is unsafe, the liability of the repair person, I think there's called innocent seller statutes. The liability isn't changed, because if you're doing work and you do it poorly, you're still at risk of your customer being pissed.
I think what she means is, so the customer initially tries to make the repair and fails.
Yeah.
Their technician comes in, makes the repair, but something was done initially by the consumer, and it causes, something to happen, an explosion, a gas leak, a flood, or something like that. So would that, does that put the liability on the service provider not knowing what was done by the homeowner?
Oh dear, that's a very good question. I don't know the answer to that. I honestly would have to think that through. I don't want to wing it. Okay. I do know that when customers mangle their own repairs, it's a revenue opportunity for you guys. Because they're now over a barrel and they really need help. So you guys can come in and become the knights in shining armor, get them squared away.
There are some companies that refuse to do it. I have seen that before.
Well, I think that's obviously a business choice, but boy, I'd sure want to be able to come in and save the day. Right. If you're trying to build a long-lasting relationship in the community where you are doing something that the customer can't do on their own, I think that's very valuable.
Yep.
But I don't know the gas leak situation. I have a feeling that you probably wouldn't get into that if you don't turn off the gas before you start working. That's not so good. Just like I think your technicians know to turn off the gas and unplug from power.
Okay. So with the Sherman Act, does that mean the diagnostic equipment that they have to purchase would fall under that?
The bill is requiring that the manufacturers make that available for sale.
Okay. Can we, as a repair organization, share service manuals without concern?
I would think so.
Okay.
You may run into legitimate copyright law issues, because you're not supposed to make copies. Mm-hmm. So it's fair use for you to have access to that material, but it's probably not legal for you to copy it and distribute it.
Okay. Here is Andy, been complaining about the lack of OBD since the early 2000s. Oh, sorry, that's not a question. That's a comment to Dave. I'm sorry. Sorry. Okay, I think that's all the questions we have now. We're just approaching an hour, so we appreciate everybody's input, their questions, you can reach out to Gay if you would like to. You can check out repair.org. You can reach out to us at United Appliance Servicers. We will be sending a survey out soon to all members to get your input, to get any feedback, as well as if you want to know more and what you need to know more about, so that you can form an educated opinion. And we're here to educate you and to get you informed and to keep you informed. So we appreciate everybody on the call today.
If I
Yeah,
could
I just
just
want
ask
to add,
one,
I'm sorry. I'll let you
yeah,
finish, Gail. I just want to say that please do that poll. We do want to know how all our members feel and stand, and what your comments, and we do all want to find common ground and get the education and the equipment and the training that we need to get. So please, everybody, participate, and that poll may also drive another session of a webinar later on down. So thank you.
Okay, and then my quick question is, if there are issues that you and your members have that you think are missing from proposed legislation, we want to work on that. We want to make the bills better. We don't want to be hurting people along the way. We highly value competition. We think that's the way forward through all of this, just making sure that people have options. It also means that you have options. So we want to work on issues. And we're really, really interested in your feedback. So we're a two-way street. And if you have questions, please let me know. And if I turn on my video so I can wave goodbye, I might lose you. So so if that's okay, let me just see what happens.
Perfect.
Uh-oh, there I am. Hello.
Yes.
Thanks for listening.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great week.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Gabe. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you. Bye.